Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas Wacker, and with me, as always, we have Kyle Cushman. And just to start off today's show, that was my playoff predictions and the weekend predictions out the window this past weekend. An insane weekend of upsets, Kyle. Obviously, a crazy playoff shakeup for the NASCAR Cup Series at Las Vegas Motor Speedway to kick off the round of 12. And then history was not made this past weekend in Formula One, which we will talk about in a bit. But first off, how are you doing today after a hectic weekend of racing?
Yeah, the racing this weekend was very, very entertaining, to say the least, especially some of those finishes. But, our predictions are not looking good right now. This was an especially rough week. I might have to throw together a couple of clips there and really, really show us up. But, no, it was great. It's always great when it goes against the predictions because it just shows how unpredictable motorsports can be. And whether it was Formula One and some of the issues we saw with Lewis Hamilton, or on the NASCAR side of things, where anything and everything that could have gone wrong for some people did go wrong. So very entertaining weekend, and I'm excited to break it down all here tonight.
Yeah, it's lots to talk about, that's for sure. But before we get into the race recaps from this past weekend, we'll start off with the news of the weekend. Not too many news stories.
Hopefully they're saving them for this little break that we have here between the two shows, and it ends up perfectly like it did that one week. But who knows? Yeah, I got a feeling that we'll start to see some more silly season stuff later this week.
Yeah, I feel like we might pass by tonight. I don't think there's any going to be new teams formed or anything like last weekend. But we'll start off today. Yeah, exactly. We'll start off tonight with a great story here with 19-year-old Gracie Trotter getting her was the first female actually to win under the ARCA Series banner, the ARCA name banner in the history of the series at the Las Vegas Bull Ring this past weekend. Obviously a great story here. A female in motorsports is something that we need more of. And obviously Hailie Deegan, and you think back to Danica Patrick when she was in the Cup Series and IndyCar over there. Gracie Trotter is kind of like the next wave, I guess, behind Hailie Deegan a little bit in terms of how far she is into her racing career, but a great story nonetheless. She's had a great series in the ARCA series this past year, and Hailie Deegan usually gets the attention, but this time it was Gracie Trotter's time to shine. So great story here, Kyle, as she gets her first win in the ARCA series, and what a story it is.
Yeah, it's a fantastic story, racing with Bill McAnally Racing, so some top equipment there in the ARCA Menards West Series, and a great result there at the Bull Ring out in Las Vegas. And anytime you can get a female in the NASCAR Series is awesome, because it's something that we don't see enough of, because motorsports is one of the few sports where, regardless of your gender, you can race against everybody else and be on equal footing. It's not the case in many other sports, but because of the way that motorsports is, you're able to do it. And so we don't see enough of it. And it's great to see that we're starting to maybe trend towards more female involvement in the NASCAR series, as well as just motorsports as a whole. So great to see Gracie Trotter get that first checkered flag, the ARCA Menards Series West Series. Of course, last year was the K&N West, which is the series that Hailie Deegan won 3 races in. But needless to say, it is history, because it is now under the ARCA label, not the more competitive E Series or even the main series yet, but we'll see what her kind of career trajectory goes. We'll see what the next steps are for her here, but at the very least, in the series that she's in right now, she's performing fairly well. 8 for 8 in terms of top 10, 6 top 5s, obviously picking up that first career win, some decent results there, and just kind of trending upwards, and that's awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, before this past weekend, I never really heard of her, I got to be honest, but she's really, made kind of history here, obviously, this past weekend, and definitely made a name for herself. And I'm really looking forward to keeping track of her more and her progression up through the ranks. Hopefully she can become a Cup Series veteran down the line. But it's a great story nonetheless. So obviously at the Bull Ring, a place made famous by the Busch brothers and everybody that's come through the Las Vegas kind of stable, going through the midgets and the lower end of the projection, or I guess the series, as you work your way up to the late model and stock car era. So it's a great story. I'm so happy for her. Hopefully that she can continue this, and we'll definitely keep you updated on her progression through the rest of the season. If she manages to find another victory lane, another checkered flag later this season. So I thought we'd start off the show with that positive news there with the future of motorsports. So we'll move on from that, I think, Kyle. Here we'll go to just a couple of little things. Kentucky and Chicagoland are rumored to be losing their dates on the Cup Series schedule. Obviously, Chicagoland is a place that's had some great finishes over the past couple of seasons. They didn't race there this season due to COVID-19 and the restrictions in the state of Indiana, but it didn't seem like they were trying to get it off the calendar for forever, but it seems like it may be going that way in terms of not being on the 2021 calendar. And Kentucky as well. It's a track that's relatively new, I guess, to the Cup Series schedule. Back in 2011 made its debut after having some successful tenures in the Xfinity Series for a couple of seasons, but it's kind of surprising to me that they're losing Chicagoland of all the mile and a halves, if this is to be the case, which usually with these kind of track rumors, it does lend itself to being correct. So what are your thoughts here, Kyle, with two new tracks possibly coming in, as we've talked about on the show before, with the 2 out of the 4 seemingly in place, but maybe these are the 2 tracks on its way out for the NASCAR Cup Series calendar in 2021?
Yeah, we knew that something had to budge in terms of the calendar, and we knew a couple things already. We know that, or it's expected, reported, it's not confirmed yet, but it's basically confirmed because of who said it. But we know that Texas is moving from having 2 dates to having 1 points-paying date, the All-Star race, and then expected to be Circuit of the Americas takes that date. So there's 1 of the 4. The second of the 4, Dover losing 1 of their dates, but replacing it with Nashville Super Speedway, owned by the same people, so they don't lose a date in terms of revenue there, but adding a different track to the lineup. So there's the 2. But we didn't know what the other 2 would be. And when you look at kind of the schedule breakdown, what was originally supposed to happen this year, some of the things kind of lean towards Chicagoland being off the schedule before that. Because if you look, the rumored date for the Nashville Super Speedway race was June 20th, while the coinciding race for that this season, had it gone according to plan, would have been Chicagoland. And that's one of the tracks that's owned by NASCAR as well. So they are able to dictate way, way more easily whether it stays on the schedule or not. So that one kind of made sense for coming off of the schedule, just in terms of what we know to this point. The Kentucky one is the one that kind of surprises me a lot more, because it's one of those tracks that's owned by Speedway Motorsports Incorporated. And that's kind of something that we've heard over the past few seasons as to why it's been so difficult for NASCAR to kind of change the schedule. It's because they've been locked into contracts and they don't own all the schedules, all the tracks. So when you've got tracks like Kentucky or New Hampshire that are owned by somebody else, you're contractually obligated to fill in those dates. And so when Kentucky has 2 dates or another track has 2 dates, it's really tough to get out of that, which is why I'm a little bit surprised that as Kentucky is what's being rumored as the other track to lose a date. Obviously, Chicagoland would just come off the schedule entirely because it's a standalone. But a little bit surprised in that regard, but something had to budge here, and it appears that it's going to be Chicagoland in Kentucky. I know that some people are a little bit upset because Chicagoland has had some really good finishes recently. Kentucky is a track that going forwards looks like it's going to age very, very well and be one of the better mile-and-a-half tracks here. But the nice thing about the NASCAR schedule going forwards is that it's short-term deals, so they can mix up the schedule a lot, and it's very easy for them going forwards here. Now that majority of these long-term contracts are up, it's easy for them to go, okay, we'll add a race for you this year, take it away the next year, add 2, drop it to 1. They have a lot more flexibility going forwards than they have in years past. So don't think of this as Chicagoland being off the schedule forever. Don't think of it as Kentucky losing a date forever. We'll see what things go forwards from here. I'm sure COVID affects things for the 2021 schedule as well, and where they can have fans and when they can't as well. So lots of different factors here, but it seems like, and we'll probably get confirmation later this week, that it's trending towards Chicagoland and Kentucky losing a date.
Yeah, I misspoke. I got the Indiana and Illinois states mixed up. It's Chicagoland's in Illinois, not in Indiana. I don't know why I was thinking that.
So.
But just to clear that up before we get, oh my goodness, it's in Illinois, not Indiana. But
another thing with Illinois there is, I believe so at least, Gateway is one of the rumored tracks as well. So if Chicagoland is losing that date, Gateway is one of the possibilities there that could step in. So
be a great track.
Potentially Illinois wouldn't even be losing a date entirely. It would just be switching to the opposite end.
It'd be an interesting move.
So it's personally one that I hope to see. I really like Gateway as a racetrack and think it could result in some very interesting racing on the Cup Series schedule. But again, the rumor is that we'll get some confirmation for 2021 finally on Wednesday, I believe it is. And I can't wait because it's been way too long that this has been going on.
Yeah. Also, Homestead is confirmed to be the second race next season.
Yes.
For the 2021 schedule. That's obviously, they're trying to capitalize on the hype in Florida after the Daytona 500, having back-to-back weekends there, or even 3 weekends in a row there with the Clash and the duels, and then the 500, and then you stay down there. It's a vacation kind of to start the season in some respects for the teams and stuff. But for 2021, it probably won't turn around that well in Florida for a vacation. But it makes,
I gotta say, from a scheduling
sense.
Perspective on its own, it makes sense because you also don't have to travel as much. If you kind of tighten things up there, then you're kind of kicking Florida out in a couple weeks there. Obviously, you go back to Daytona later in the season as well, but it kind of makes sense from that perspective as well. Maybe save a couple dollars early in the season there in terms of travel, but starting the season with the Daytona 500 and following it up with one of the best mile and a halves in Homestead, I am very okay with that.
Yeah, I wish it had 2 dates. It's like the best mile. Now that it's not the championship race, I think it makes sense for it to have 2 races, but at the same time, you don't want to overdo Florida to an extent. You got to kind of move around the country. So, I mean, Homestead is my favorite mile and a half by far. I love the track. It just provides great racing. So many comers and goers throughout the race. So it's a great start to the season for 2021. As Kyle said, hopefully the schedule is released sometime this week so we get a little bit of clarity. Obviously,
it's been postponed too much. Start. We don't care if it's like 2 races. Just confirm stuff already.
Well, it's basically confirmed 2 races. It's kind of weird how they've done it because some dates have been confirmed, but then you are up in the air with a whole bunch of different things. So they've taken a different approach. It's definitely been about 1.5 years since they announced this season's schedule, which is crazy to say. So hopefully sooner rather than later, we will get the news and we will talk about that. If it comes out on Wednesday, we'll talk about that later this week on our Thursday show. So knock on wood that we'll get that news to you on Thursday. But also for 2021, in terms of news, teams are expected to get the 2021 rules package for the NASCAR Cup Series. There isn't meant to be much shift or change in that regard with a new car coming in 2022. I don't expect NASCAR to really change anything at all for next season, given the amount of money that's going to have to go into developing a new car. I don't think teams are going to want to invest in some new rules for next season. So expect those to stay pretty standard as this season. We'll stick with the big-ass spoiler for the mile and a halves and the low downforce package. The high downforce package and low horsepower package. So we'll see if there's any changes, but I imagine that there won't be anything really on that, Kyle. Not really, right?
Yeah, it's just like it makes sense. There's no reason to add extra costs given everything that we know about the economic climate right now. And with 2022 being a brand new car, just kind of keep things as is. Make it easy for the teams, make it easy for yourself, and really put that focus and extra money and basically extra time into making that 2022 car the best it possibly can be, because that's what you're banking on. You've kind of hit so far on scheduling, on a lot of different things recently. The ball's rolling in a positive direction. The final key here is about getting that car right, and hopefully it will be. We really don't know a whole bunch about it yet. We obviously have some pictures, we have some tests, we have a little bit of video, but nothing really too concrete. And of course, that'll start to ramp up as well because it was originally supposed to be for this upcoming season in 2021, got pushed back to 22. So just keep things status quo for another year and then really hit the ground running in 2022.
Yeah, I can't wait for 2022. Hopefully the scheduling changes for next season will provide that extra bit of excitement to kind of tie us over for 2022. And then we really got to come out of the gates running there in 2 years' time. But we'll move on to the final quick thing here of the news and notes section. It's a little bit something closer to my heart, I guess you could say. It's Kyle Busch's son, Brexton Busch, won his first race this past weekend. So the up-and-coming generation maybe for motorsports with Kyle Busch, his son Brexton getting his first win. It's obviously a big deal for that family. So, and the Busch family swept the weekend, which is a big thing which we'll talk about in a little bit here. But just thought I'd give Brexton Busch a little bit of a shout out there because sooner rather than later, he will be working his way up to the system, and he's got probably one of the best teachers you could have for NASCAR. So congratulations to the entire Busch family on that win. So without further ado, Kyle, I think we can move on to like the biggest thing of this past weekend, and that's last night at Las Vegas Motor Speedway.
It was weird having a Sunday night race again. That was a little bit weird.
I know. It's the Vegas race that kind of throws things off. We had Darlington a couple weeks ago that had a similar kind of thing, but another night race to kick off the playoffs, 4 straight. We'll move to a day race next weekend at Talladega, but I cannot believe what happened last night. Like 220 laps of that race, pretty straightforward, right? Your typical mile and a half. Good racing, comers and goers a little bit, some contact, some rough racing, and you had a couple of different leaders throughout the night. But one caution just goes to show you how much one caution can change, especially in the middle of green flag pit stops. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But this is going to be fun to recap here. I can't wait to kind of get into this. So Harvick was on pole. Chase Elliott takes the lead on the opening lap and leads the competition caution. Kyle's pick there for fantasy looked to be paying off early with Chase Elliott.
Already?
I'm just starting it off. It's a positive sign to start the race.
It was a positive start.
Right? I was nervous. After 220 or 200 laps, I'd say, you were in the driving seat. You had me with your separation on Austin Dillon and Chase Elliott. But we'll get on to how those guys finish a little bit later. But we'll go into the first set of pit stops. Kyle Busch wins the race off pit road, but then Denny Hamlin takes the lead on the restart. And then Joey Logano, up to his usual ways of blocking people aggressively, blocks Chase Elliott. It was pretty ballsy, I got to say.
It was.
It was. Chase Elliott had a really big head of steam off of turn 2, but Logano blocked him, and he's still not making any friends out there, but he still says he has plenty of them off the racetrack, which is the most important thing. So that's what they said in the broadcast. I'm not going to go against what they're going to say, but I have my own opinions on that, as we talked about last week. But Keselowski was actually really struggling early. The biggest surprise for me was on the splitter, as he reported on the radio, and just could not get going basically the whole night. Like, I think the car had more potential than what it showed. I just think he lost that track position, and his field just got so spread out. He was just so behind. It was hard for him to make up that ground. I think he had a top 10, top 8 car, but with where he finished in 13th, it's not the greatest start for the round of 12 for Brad Keselowski there. But definitely the biggest surprise of the night for me in terms of just his performance after having such a great average finish and statistically being probably the best of among the active drivers here at Las Vegas. But
definitely,
Denny Hamlin wins stage 1 ahead of Joey Logano, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott getting there in 4th with some crucial stage points. And then Kevin Harvick rounds up the top 5, Austin Dillon in 6th. And then my 2 separate picks of Blaney and Bowman back there in 7th and 8th. Martin Truex Jr., a bit of a slow start there in stage 1, finishing 9th. And Clint Boyer, a guy that we needed crucial points this past weekend, gets 1 stage point in stage 1. So I know you didn't get the full chance to see the entire first stage there, Kyle, but after the first stage of the race, what were your kind of opinions of what we had seen thus far?
Yeah, I missed about like 85% of that first stage because I had a nice little show meeting going on for some of our school stuff, but had it on kind of side, checking it out a little bit. The end of the stage was kind of fun to watch as I keyed in on that battle between Matt DiBenedetto and the playoff driver Clint Boyer looking to grab that 1 stage point, but it was kind of playing out for the most part how I kind of expected. Obviously, I was not expecting Keselowski to drop back that far that quickly. just given his numbers going into this race. He hadn't finished outside the top 10 at Las Vegas since 2012. That's how long that streak has been. So I was not expecting that at all, but Elliott being up front, Harvick looking solid, Austin Dillon looking good. So it was kind of projecting the way that I thought it would, and kind of did so as well in that second stage. But as you mentioned off the top, all it takes is one piece of metal, one yellow flag at the right time to throw everything out the window, and that's exactly what happened later on in this race.
Yeah, I think another big surprise with me was Denny Hamlin's speed here at Vegas. Winning
that's
the first stage is something that I said stay away from him in fantasy this past week, and I could have been further from the truth. I mean, he was sensational the whole night. Could have probably won the race if it stayed green.
We expected the opposite between Hamlin and Harvick. Going into this weekend, we expected, just based off of recent results, Harvick to be that guy up at the front contending for the stage wins and contending at the end, and Hamlin maybe to be that guy challenging for a top 5, but closer in that 6 to 10 range. And it was basically roles reversed, which was a little bit surprising. And the recent results at Las Vegas would suggest otherwise. But a good bounce back for that 11 team, especially early on, showing that dominance after a couple rough races in that first stage. In that first round, excuse me.
Yeah, it was a good start to the playoffs for the round of 12 for Denny Hamlin after struggling in that first round. A round that statistically looked great for him, but this round didn't shape up so well, but he's off to a great start here in the round of 12. So we'll move on here onto the next restart. Kyle Busch and Logano battling it out off of turn 2, and Hamlin makes it 3 wide after losing some spots on the pit stops. And I was shocked that he made that move on his teammate, first off. And I think it caught Kyle Busch by surprise and Joey Logano, because Kyle was going to make in his usual entry into turn 3 to go to the bottom, go to the white line. But Hamlin was there, couldn't go, had to kind of stay straight. And then Logano was expecting to go down on Kyle's door to the bottom. And the two of them made contact going into turn 3. Logano gets the worst end of it with a tire rub, forcing him to make a green flag pit stop. So I couldn't believe that Kyle got out on the good side of things there for once. But it definitely hurt the performance of the 18 car moving forward. And Hamlin gets away with it was aggressive move, I'd say, for that point in the race. But the fact that, Hamlin made that move and it stuck for him, it was a good move. I was kind of upset with him at the time, but it makes sense in terms of how important track position is at 1.5 miles and just that clean air. So you can't fault Hamlin, really. It was just a racing incident, but it definitely cost Logano big time in terms of getting stage 2 points and not getting the finish. He probably had the speed in that car and that he deserved. So he was forced to make a green flag pit stop, like I said, with the tire rub, hurting his chances to get a solid day. Managed to recover to get 14th behind his teammate there. Was stuck a lap down for the majority after that, just kind of play catch up. But Chase Elliott takes the lead from Denny Hamlin there, and it was kind of smooth sailing there, for a bit. Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin really seemed like the class of the field, while you had Alex Bowman as someone that was kind of lurking there, kind of in that second stage. Harvick had kind of drifted back at that point, but it was an interesting kind of mix there in the top 5 with some non-playoff guys, some playoff guys, and we'll move on to the green flag pit stop sequence for stage 2. And this one, another bad break for Kyle Busch, as his pit gun totally faults the crew member on the right front tire, forcing them to have a 25-second plus
though, I gotta say,
pit stop.
To recognize that issue that quickly, hop over and get back, bravo.
Yeah, it was unfortunate for Kyle, as he was running 4th at the time of the pit stops and then fell back to later in the top 10 and then managed to not get any stage points in stage 2. But props to the crew guy for realizing the problem and then going over the wall himself, getting the gun, coming back over. I'm surprised he didn't get a penalty there, because in all that kind of confusion and scurriness, I don't know if that's a word or not, but just like the amount of anxious energy there, that someone didn't come over the wall kind of quickly to try and help him, and then you get too many men. But props to Kyle's crew there to try and recover from what was just a freak thing. I remember back when these pit guns were introduced by NASCAR, there were so many mistakes. There's so many problems with them. There hasn't been that many for quite some time now since NASCAR has mandated the pit guns, because they got really out of hand with the pit gun technology and how much innovation they put into them for especially Joe Gibbs Racing. I'd have to say they got into the 11-second pit stop range, which was pretty much, it seemed impossible. But just a tough break for the 18 team. Jimmy Johnson would also get caught for speeding on pit road during that green flag pit stop sequence. And not the way Jimmy Johnson's kind of last Las Vegas race was shaping up to be there. But somehow he ended up on the lead lap, which we'll talk about in a second, and how his kind of wreck ensued chaos, which we'll talk about. But Chase Elliott wins stage 2 ahead of Denny Hamlin, who was coming pretty hard there at the end of the stage, but Chase Elliott holds him off to get the stage win. Alex Bowman there in 3rd. Martin Truex Jr. showing up a little bit. My race pick there in 4th. Obviously, Kyle's pick winning the stage there with Chase Elliott. Seemed pretty solid. Gotta say, it was making me nervous. Chase Elliott really proving that.
I was feeling good.
He's good at Vegas, despite the numbers. And Ryan Blaney rounds at the top 10. Austin Dillon, 6th in both stages. Kevin Harvick in 7th. Matt DiBenedetto showing his force there in 8th, which we'll talk about him in a little bit. And then Clint Boyer and William Byron round up the top 10. Kyle Busch in 11th, like I said. And then Joey Logano was mired back in 27th, 1 lap down after the contact there. So after the second stage here, Kyle, it seemed like you were shaping up well for fantasy, but also in terms of the race, it seemed like it was kind of a 2-3 horse race there. Some definitely had your front 3, and then you're like 4 to 6 range, and then after that it was kind of all over the place. But Chase Elliott really looking strong there after the first 2 stages.
Yeah, Elliott was the guy to watch, really, because he had the most stage points to that point, 17 coming out of the second stage, but Hamlin was right there. Alex Bowman had a bit of a gaffe there, giving up the lead, just running too high on the front stretch, which was kind of weird. But it really seemed like it would come down to those 3 and then maybe 1 or 2 other people later in that top 10. Maybe Kyle Busch could have a resurgence there after having the pit gun issue there. But it was shaping up to be an interesting finish there, just with all of those players going into that final stage. And we kind of got to see it for a little bit, and then we'll talk about in a second here, the mayhem that ensued afterwards.
Yeah, and we'll move on to the next portion, which is an unfortunate break for a playoff guy here. The first guy to really have a detrimental issue. Obviously, Logano had his problem, but he semi-recovered, I'd say. And then Austin Dillon, the tough break here. Going to the tail end of the longest line first off for the penalty with the crew guy calling it falling over the pit wall to try and recover a tire. It's always funny to see those.
So funny.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But it was just like.
It was, but it also screwed over my fantasy.
Yeah, and it did not get better for Austin Dillon from there. Working his way, kind of got stuck back there in the 20s. Didn't make the progression like he did at Richmond when he had to go to the back with the penalty. Obviously, it's a little bit different. Dillon had a better car probably there at Richmond, but a top 10 car nonetheless, it seemed like, for Austin Dillon after the first 2 stages. But that pit penalty was just the beginning of the end for the 3-team on Sunday night, as he would have huge issues, as it seemed like debris kind of knocked off the steering line or something. They didn't really specify what the problem was, but he was slow off of turn 4, steam pouring out of the windshield there, and he would go to pit road, losing multiple laps and ruining his night, the biggest loser of the night by far amongst the playoff guys. So this was pretty much putting Austin Dillon into must-win territory over the next 2 weeks, especially with who won the race, which we'll talk about in a second. But Austin Dillon with a tough break there, Kyle.
Yeah, heartbreaker for that team, because they were running so well at a track that Dillon had some positive results at recently. Of course, that influenced my decision to put him in my fantasy lineup. And it was looking good early on, back-to-back 6th-place finishes in the first 2 stages, consistently in and around that top 10 range. But one mistake puts you to the back, and then I think it was a piece of debris. Ran into that and knocked a belt off or something and screwed with the power steering and overheating, and that's all she wrote for the race, really. Going down 8 laps, you can't recover from that. You can maybe pick up a couple points if there's some wreckers, but you're basically done at that point. And when you're Austin Dillon and you're in such a big hole off the bat anyways, and you have a 20-plus point swing going from potentially finishing inside that top 10, maybe even squeaking into a top 5, getting middle 30s points would have been huge for this team. But instead they come out of this race with just 15 points, mainly that coming from the stages. And they're in a massive hole. Obviously, they're 12th now out of 12 going forwards here in the round of 12. And you've got Talladega, which who knows what can happen there, and then the Roval, but you can't really rest your laurels on a Talladega race. And Austin Dillon isn't necessarily known as the top end road course guy, so it's not like he's going to be expected to be in that top 3 conversation.
We say that,
going for the win, but who knows? Who knows? If we're being honest, Kaz Grala finished in the top 10 in his first career race in that 3 earlier this season at a road course. So who the hell knows, if we're being honest? But it is very much a dire situation for that 3 team. I believe it's 30 or more points out.
32
on that. So
32.
32 points out. Even if you can somehow make up a ton of points, finish top 3, get stage points at Talladega, you're still probably on the outside looking in, and that's asking a lot anyway. So extremely unfortunate for that team, because it was shaping up really well for this Vegas race. It was going exactly to plan as I thought it would for Dillon, maybe being able to squeak his way through. Yeah. Just didn't get the finish. Had just a fluke incident, and the storybook kind of story that we were seeing unfold here in these playoffs quickly falling off for Austin Dillon. Who knows what can happen in these next couple races, but we got a different Cinderella at the end of the night anyways.
Yeah. Kurt Busch definitely has the glass slipper on Sunday night, but we'll talk about him in just a second here. Jimmy Johnson, this is where everything goes to heck. It seemed like this was Denny Hamlin and Chase Elliott's race kind of there at the end. 20 laps or so, around that number. 230 laps had been in the books, but then during the final set of green flag pit stops, all of the leaders had pitted. It was insane to see that all the leaders pit. Usually there's 1 or 2 amongst the top 6 or 7 that go long a little bit in the green flag pit stop window, but they all pitted within 4 or 5 laps, I'd say, for sure. And this really cost the majority of them, as Jimmy Johnson blows a tire during the green flag pit stop cycle and completely shakes up the running order, as all of the leaders that were in a secure spot, seemed like we're on for a top 5, top 10, we're all a lap down, as some guys got the lucky break, including Kurt Busch, Matt DiBenedetto, Matt Kenseth, Chris Buescher, whole bunch of cast of names that we would see back in the middle to late teens and even into the 20s. They all stayed out, went a little bit longer. Kurt Busch had not had the greatest night up to that point outside the top 10, and he gets a lucky break here. Matt DiBenedetto would cycle out to the race lead there, as all the leaders were stuck a lap down, like I said. So this completely shook everything up, as all of the leaders had to take the wave around, and what that means is you have to start behind the guys ahead of you in the running order and the lap down cars as well. So they were mired back into, I guess, about 15th in terms of place in the running order there. And it was going to be a struggle for them to make it up in those last 30 laps with the amount of cars they had to pass. So Matt DiBenedetto looking for his first career win, with Kurt Busch as the only playoff guy inside the top 10 at that point, which is crazy to say. But Kurt Busch would take the lead on the restart. Matt DiBenedetto's big chance there to try and take the win in I guess less than how much, 72 hours. He's going to have to find out if he's going to be a part of Wood Brothers next season with the contract option. So looking at, if he gets that win here on last night, I'm sure he would have been signing that contract in victory lane, but he didn't quite get that done last night. But Kurt Busch takes the lead, and then it seemed like he was basically on for a win guaranteed. But John Hunter Nemechek, one of those guys that were out there, got the lucky break with the caution there, spins and slides up right in front of the pack in turn 3 and 4. I don't know. Did he have contact going into turn 3? I don't know
if he had contact, but it looked like he had a tire go down. So I don't know if he had contact on the restart and then tire rub and it just eventually went down, but definitely looked like a tire went down just based off of the spin and the way he came flying back up the track.
Yeah, and unfortunately for Eric Jones and Ricky Stenhouse Jr., nowhere to go. Kyle Busch just barely misses it. Definitely had my breath taken away there, as it was pretty scary, but that he manages to survive. So Eric Jones and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had nowhere to go. Nemechek just came right up in front of the track. I don't know what the heck he was doing, but he didn't try to keep it down to the bottom. He came right up onto the track. But all in all, Eric Jones and John Hunter Nemechek would keep going. Unfortunately for Stenhouse, he would get the worst end of it. But leading to another restart, Kurt Busch and Matt DiBenedetto hold off the guys. Some people pitted there on that caution, namely Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., I think Harvick pitted as well. A couple of those guys that just couldn't quite get through the pack there on that last restart decided to get some fresh tires, get a clean slate, and try it again. And they made some progress for sure, as that was probably the most pivotal decision in them pitting there. Just having that 10, 15 laps fresher tires really helped them in this next stint here before William Byron brings out the caution once again with 7 laps to go. After some contact with Christopher Bell, who had a tire going down. Corey LaJoie would also be involved. Setting up for NASCAR overtime. It took them a while to clean it up, so it went all the way to overtime. 7 laps under caution there for a green-white checkered. This was quite the finish. Kurt Busch and Matt DiBenedetto on the front row. Denny Hamlin had worked his way up to the 4th position, but interestingly, he took the 6th spot with the choose rule, so put him back an extra row, which kind of threw me off a little bit. Why wouldn't you make it go to the inside there and then try to make it 3 wide going into turn 1 kind of thing?
Yeah.
I think Hamlin might want to rethink that when he looks back on it.
Also allowed Ryan Blaney to get in behind his pseudo Penske teammate there into Benedetto to give him that big push going into that restart, which looked like it was going to be big there. But as the restart kind of played out, a lot of the aero that we get to see manipulated all the time and all the side drafting played in big time on that final restart.
Yeah, and Kurt Busch nailed the restarts when he was in the lead. It was pretty incredible to watch.
Incredible display.
Because on restarts, you usually see them bumper to bumper. But the fact that he was able to accelerate that well with such little wheel spin compared to his competition, Kurt Busch put on a masterclass there in the last 30 laps.
Greg Grayson, baby.
Absolutely upsets the entire chase grid, playoff grid, everything, whatever you want to call it. Kurt Busch wins for the first time at his hometown track in Las Vegas, advances to the round of 8 automatically with this win. I can't believe it. I don't know what else to say. Kurt Busch put on the drive of his life in those last 30 laps, holding off a Benedetto that seemed like he may have been faster as he was the majority of the night, but the clean air really prevailed there for Kurt Busch. He said he had some tricks up his sleeve, and he got a little bit of luck in Vegas, which you sometimes need, and that's all Kurt Busch needed to get the victory. Someone we both had in our playoff prediction video out in this round last week. Don't stay away from in your fantasy lineup. Like, oh everything we could have said could have been further from the truth, and that is honestly, Kyle, this is why I love motorsports so much, especially NASCAR, right? Like, there's nothing you can predict, really. This is a perfect example of that. And, you know, if you tuned into this race, it's for the first time. It's probably hard to grasp what this win necessarily means to a playoff picture. But for us, this is insane. You never see this, really. This reminds me a bit of Eric Almirola a couple of seasons ago at Talladega, where he just completely won in a shock fashion. And Kurt Busch, someone that was the lowest on the playoff grid coming into Vegas, -4 points. It's a small margin, but a deficit nonetheless, as we talked about last week. But he comes out to Vegas and wins. Oh, my goodness. The numbers were totally against it, and that's why you can never trust the numbers on some of these occasions. Definitely brought me down to a bit more of another bar down just in terms of my confidence, just because Kurt Busch gave me a dagger to the heart, as this was huge for the playoffs, huge for him. So happy for him. I was cheering against him, I got to be honest, because for Kyle Busch, for selfish reasons, this really screws the bottom people there. But nonetheless, for Kurt Busch, the first Busch brother to be in victory lane this season, which is crazy to say.
Oh my God, I didn't even clue into that.
And for Monster Energy and everybody, he was pumped after the race. How could you not be emotional for Kurt Busch? Something that he's been waiting to do for 21 starts at his home track. But Kyle, this was insane. There's no other word to really describe it. It's unbelievable for Kurt Busch. Chip Ganassi Racing and the entire team there. And the playoffs just continue to surprise year in and year out.
Yeah, it's remarkable. For one, just the shock factor of Kurt Busch going out, and around that, it really looked like he was either going to need some consistent top 5, top 10 finishes or go out and win a race. He does so in the very first race at Vegas, which is the one that we maybe expected him least to be in contention for the win. The numbers suggested stay the hell away from him in fantasy and win picks and everything. And a little bit of strategy call from Matt McCall there worked out wonders. But it wasn't just the strategy call. Let's give Kurt Busch the respect that he deserves here. There was still quite a few laps left there when that first caution went down and everything got jumbled up. He got the lead on the first restart. He held serve and then he held serve again. It was really a remarkable showing from him in those final few laps, not only to take that, what it was looking like a 15th place car earlier in that race.
No stage points, nothing.
No stage points, not even in the conversation of the stage points. Most of the day he was in that 15th to 20th range, and he goes out, gets that track position, and with that clean air one, he gets it off of that first restart against one of the premier restarters in NASCAR in Matt DiBenedetto. And then he goes out and keeps the lead subsequently, even with a handful of laps run on another restart. And then obviously the dash at the end in overtime. A remarkable showing from Kurt Busch, a great showing from that from that team as a whole, with Matt McCall finally getting that long play to finally work for him. He tries that so much, and it really hasn't gone their way all season long. He finally got it to work, and when you get Kurt Busch track position, he's not going to let it up all that easily. It was a little bit heartbreaking because I thought if it had stayed green after that first caution, I thought Matt DiBenedetto was going to get him, and he was going to get his first win, which would have been awesome. He's personally my favorite driver, so that would have been great to see. But finishing second is a huge result regardless for him, and props to Matt DiBenedetto as well. Wasn't able to get the restarts off the top with Kurt Busch playing it excellently, but was able to show speed, stay in second, and hold off some of those guys behind as well. But a superb finish to this race, which was shaping up. It was a good race to begin with. I was really enjoying the action through the little bit that I saw in the first stage, the second stage, and when it was normal in that final stage. But, oh boy, I am always okay with a wild card finish, and man, did we get one this past weekend.
I mean, it was shaping up there to be even worse for the playoff guys. Like, we were looking at, 30-point finishes as max if it kind of stayed green there. Like, even the guys that had all those stage points would have even worked, right? Yeah. So all those restarts really helped those guys that got screwed over by that caution. But Kurt Busch managed, and Matt DiBenedetto were basically the only two that were able to hold serve from that lucky break with the caution. So it was interesting, though, on that final restart. Bowman got a great push on 2 laps to go from, I think it was Hamlin, and he did not go with it to the inside of DiBenedetto. And if he did, I think Kurt Busch could have been in trouble there on that last lap. But with DiBenedetto kind of holding serve there and Bowman playing a little bit,
it was weird.
It was interesting.
He got
Junior was shocked in the booth.
Yeah, he got that big push down the backstretch when the side drafts on Ryan Blaney broke up DiBenedetto and Blaney. So then DiBenedetto was hung out to dry there at the front. Huge push from Hamlin. And then it almost seemed like Bowman maybe got to Busch too early there down the backstretch and had to check up rather than being able to cut to the inside. Or I really don't know what it was. Maybe he just chose not to there. I don't know what it was, but it was Hamlin that ended up coming out on top there because he gets the big push. Bowman checks up, he cuts to the inside, and he's the one that ends up finishing third. And obviously the 1 point isn't huge here because Bowman had such a nice day out of that. But at Talladega and the Roval, who knows what can happen. And if you're looking at maybe 1 point or even the victory potentially for Bowman here as the rest of this round plays out, it'll be interesting to see how that storyline kind of develops.
Yeah, for sure. Points are crucial in this round. This is probably the most crucial round for
whether
points.
It's Austin Dillon
especially
at the back,
this one.
Picking up a couple extra points, just being able to get back out 8 laps down, picking up a couple extra points from people wrecking out, or Alex Bowman missing out on a point or two, or even the win because of that decision there late. It'll be interesting to see how all of those play out. And that's one of the nice things about the format that NASCAR has. For all of its faults, it makes for very, very entertaining races and different storylines to watch. And going into Talladega and the Roval, it's only going to be magnified here.
Yeah, that was meant to be the easy race of the round, surprisingly.
Exactly. We talked
about last week, right?
Man. This round of 12.
Like, people overlooked Vegas of a casual mile and a half, get your points, and then go on the plane and go home kind of thing. But the last 2 years with Vegas in the playoffs, props to NASCAR for putting it in there because it surprised some really great racing and some chaotic finishers, excuse me, and some playoff guys that are in desperate holes coming out of this, especially with Kurt Busch. The guy on the lowest on the playoff grid comes out of here with the victory. So I cannot believe it still. As I look at the points now, it's really clogged things up, really made everything tight there. So we'll get into the notable finishers here. Obviously, we'll start off with Kurt Busch. Pretty notable there. Matt DiBenedetto there in second, like we talked about as well. And then Denny Hamlin in third, like Kyle said. Martin Truex Jr. in fourth, and Alex Bowman rounds out the top 5. So those three right there, it's pretty simple. But DiBenedetto and Kurt Busch were the stories of the night in terms of how they finished and what this could mean down the line for both drivers, as Kurt Busch gives him a chance to maybe go to the championship four. I know that's a long shot in terms of his point situation, but that's an extra 5 points add to the next round as well for him, which could be crucial. And then obviously DiBenedetto looking for a contract for next season. Kyle Busch in 6th recovered, did not seem like he was going to get there at all there at the end, kind of stuck back in there in the mid to late teens for the majority of the final stage. But a great restart as Kyle Busch does, gets up to 6th, salvages a day that was looking to be better in the first stage, but the second stage really screwed him over in terms of stage points there. So a little bit of a missed opportunity there for the 18 team. Ryan Blaney there in 7th. My 2 fantasy picks that really paid off here at the end with Blaney and Bowman getting the finishes.
I don't know how you do it, man. I don't know how every single time my guys look good through 3/4 of the race and then always have an issue, and then your guys come out of decent races to get those really good finishes. I don't know how you do it.
I'm happy I went with my gut on Bowman. I'll just say that as it turned out. Eric Jones in 8th after having that incident there with John Hunter Nemechek, recovered to 8th, which is really, really good for Eric Jones. Did not hear a peep about him the whole night, but top 10 for Eric Jones nonetheless. Chris Buescher there in 9th, the third best guy that had that strategy. Another top 10 for Chris Buescher, back-to-back weekends with Bristol and Vegas here. Really turned an uptick of a performance over the past month or so, I'd say, from the 17 team. Definitely showing that, the first part of the season was a bit tough for them, but as the season has gone on here, they have progressed as a team. So really solid to see him get a top 10. Kevin Harvick in 10th, not really kind of a miserable showing from Kevin Harvick. I got to be honest, was nowhere really from his typical 1.5 mile ways. Just he could kind of skate to the next round anyways, but a little bit disappointing there from Kevin Harvick. Jimmy Johnson recovered to 11th after that blown tire. It looked like the entire right rear was destroyed there, but he recovered, was able to stay on the lead lap during that whole sequence, which I don't know how he did, but he did anyways, and comes out with an 11th place finish. So not the worst ending to Jimmy Johnson's Las Vegas career, where he's had one of the most memorable finishes, obviously back there in 2006 there with that iconic finish with that drag race to the line. I think it was with Matt Kenseth, if I'm correct. But, Jimmy Johnson, props to him. Obviously not going to get the storylines anymore with him being out of the playoffs and not making it this season. But hopefully they give Jimmy his due throughout the remainder of the season here, as hopefully he can get that last win. I don't want it to be back in 2017 where he got his final win. It would be a shame if that's the case. But Clint Bowyer in 12th, manageable day for Clint Bowyer. Doesn't come out of here in a great point situation by any means, but at the same time, it could have been a lot worse. It was, better than we probably expected from Clint Bowyer this past weekend at Vegas. So maybe you can lead into that, maybe carry the momentum into the next 2 races where he should be stronger at Talladega and the Roval. Like we said, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, they're in 13th and 14th. Ryan Newman in 15th place for him. Solid for Ryan Newman. Roush with a solid weekend here with a top 10 and a top 15 there with both cars. Newman was definitely on that strategy there that got lucky with the break. Stayed a little bit better than some, not as great as others kind of thing, kind of fell in the mid-pack there, but was better on that last restart, did not get going, really cost Chase Elliott, who we'll talk about in a second, but he was inside the top 10 before that final restart, just fell back a little bit there. Eric Almirola, someone we didn't even hear about the entire night, back in 17th, a really dismal showing there for the 10 team compared to I guess SHR actually had a pretty bad night overall.
They did not show up at all.
One top 10, Bowyer in 12th, and then Almirola back there in 17th. He didn't even hear about Custer, obviously, with him being out of the playoffs. But Eric Almirola definitely needs a huge 2 weeks here if he thinks about moving on to the round of 8, which will be tough to do. He's going to need probably an upset victory at Talladega for it to happen for himself. Ryan Preece there in 19th. He's been improving. He's made his way into these notable finishers quite a bit over the past little bit here, trying to stay on that ride for next season. Hasn't been confirmed whether he'll be back or not at JTG Doherty Racing, but definitely showing that he has some potential there. Obviously, he's ahead of his teammate Stenhouse with his issue. John Hunter Nemechek, rounds out the top 20 after his incident, kind of recovered there for 20th. Michael McDowell in 21st. Didn't get a top 20 like we usually see from McDowell. It seemed like a race that he would get a top 20, but 21st nonetheless. And then we get on to the big one here. Chase Elliott back in 22nd spot after being a top two car the entire night. Got totally screwed on that final restart there. And the caution, then the restarts, everything just went Chase Elliott's way in the wrong sense, and manages to get a 22nd place finish, which does not look good for him in terms of the points. He's above the cutoff line, but it could have been a heck of a lot more if he had even gotten a top 10 finish. But 22nd there, and then 32nd for Austin Dillon. Two guys that Kyle took the gamble on in terms of his fantasy. Kind of rounds out the notable finishes here. So unfortunate for him. 4 for 4 for the start of the playoffs for myself. It looked good, man. I'm not going to lie. It looked like another Darlington where you just got me a little bit, but those late restarts really killed you. And then obviously, Dylan, you can't plan for that. At least they didn't take each other out this time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm glad that they didn't take each other out this time. But it was shaping up to be an awesome, awesome finish for us in fantasy, because if you look at the two differences we had in Chase Elliott and Austin Dillon there, it was looking like it was going to come down, or sorry, for me, and then for you, Alex Bowman and Ryan Blaney, it looked like it was going to come down to basically who had the best average finish out of those four guys. And
it was
it was looking really, really close the entire race. I had the edge in stage points, but it looked like Bowman was kind of resurging there in that third stage, battling for that lead. Ryan Blaney lurking there in that top 10, getting up to that top 5, but all it takes is one penalty and then the cautions. And then I believe somebody on Twitter said that Ryan Newman maybe blocked Elliott there, and he fell back, which classic Ryan Newman screwing me over. But hey, you know what? I'll take the losses on the chin at this point. Props to you for being able to come out here and still get a very solid fantasy result. How are you looking in the standings now overall? Was that a positive, neutral?
Yes. It was, not the obviously when you're inside the top 600 now, it gets really
it's pretty
tight.
Tough, yeah.
But I moved up about 70 spots this week, 528. So I think a lot of guys.
This is what I'm competing with. This guy's getting consistently
like 194, at the same time, I could have got more points because I put Logano in the garage.
Yeah.
Because of his the 9 stage points made it really tough for me to put him in there. Looking back on it, I should have thought about it a little bit more with putting Logano keeping with it, because
to be fair,
if he gets within 9 points of Keselowski, it's kind of a net gain. And I like Keselowski more later on than Logano for the season in terms of the tracks, but.
To be fair to you in that decision, at the time you made that decision, Logano was, I believe, at least 2 laps down, was it?
Was a lap down.
Was a lap down, one lap down, but
nowhere near the free pass.
Wasn't looking like he was going to be in that free pass position for most of the night. But then we just got a bunch of cautions there at the end. He gets back on the lead lap, gets a decent finish. Keselowski has a bad restart there at the end, finishes outside the top 10. And all of a sudden, Logano finishes with 32 points, Keselowski 24. Not a huge discrepancy, but again,
I could have moved inside the top 10 in my league if I had put him in.
Okay.
But it was tough. I didn't get any of the bonus picks right either, unfortunately. But how could you have picked Kurt Busch to win? If you had him as your bonus pick this past weekend, my hat off to you. Props to that. But a Chevrolet also in victory lane. I had Ford as the manufacturer. It's so tough with that kind of stuff. But Chevrolet on the board for a very few times this season as well. So, yeah,
first
what
time
a race.
Other than Hendrick Motorsports, correct?
Yep.
Because you got Chase Elliott there, you got Byron who got the win at Daytona, Bowman. But then other than that, Bowman at the beginning of the season as well. But Kurt Busch,
nothing at Chip there. Nowhere. Yeah, there's not many Chevy.
Yeah, because
teams anymore,
usually we see Kyle Larson up there, but obviously the 42 has had their issues this season. So not even that 42 car in victory lane either. So. Congrats to Kurt Busch, of course, getting that emotional victory.
Oh, yeah.
Of all the places he could possibly win at, maybe other than the Daytona 500, this is probably at or near the top of his list, winning at Vegas. And didn't look like it was going to happen for him for much of this race. Things fall into his favor, and all of a sudden he's in the round of 8 for the first time in at least a couple of seasons.
Yeah. He's had more success at Chip Ganassi than he did at SHR. It's pretty incredible to watch. Another underdog, kind of if it's going to happen to anybody, I'm happy it's Kurt Busch. He deserves a good break, coming near the end of his career kind of thing. It's not going to be much longer. I'd say another maybe 2 seasons for Kurt Busch. So anytime he gets the chance to win, it's a great sight to see. So congrats to the entire team there at Chip Ganassi Racing and Kurt Busch for the Busch brothers, or not the Busch brothers, but the Bushes sweeping the weekend in some respect there. Busch family. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on to Cush's threes here, Kyle. After an exciting weekend at Vegas with the NASCAR Cup Series with Kurt Busch out on top, I can imagine he'd probably be in your positives, but we'll see if you put him there.
Well, beginning with Cush's threes, it's basically the one team as a whole. You could have Kurt Busch's name there. You could have Matt McCall's name. We've talked a lot about Kurt Busch, but how about Matt McCall here?
He gets the own individual.
I'm giving it to him on his own because he deserves it for this call. He's had those gutsy calls for basically as long as I can remember here. It seems like every single pit cycle, unless Kurt Busch is inside that top 10 to begin with, he's taking that risk, going long, hoping to get that track position with a caution. But it hasn't played into his favor at all this year or in the last couple of years, really. But finally gets it to go his way after being in that 15th place kind of position. And then he gets his guy up out front, and he's able to hold serve, as we've mentioned here, and get the win. So Matt McCall is the one that gets the first place on Cush's threes here because fantastic call, gutsy call, needed to go out and do something for his driver. He did so, went his way. So Matt McCall is getting it for me. First crew chief appearance, but also basically Kurt Busch as well, because he was fantastic there at the end of that race. And just quickly on Kurt Busch, because there's a couple other names I want to toss in here. So it's basically like 4 here because it's Matt McCall / Kurt Busch here. But Kurt Busch, what can you say after that performance at the end of the race? Giving the shout out to his drag racing experience there, of course, had that little foray when he was still with Penske back in the day. That's my roots in motorsports, so it was great to get that shout out. But he showed up big time there. We haven't really seen Kurt Busch in that front row to show off kind of those drag racing experience and getting up through the gears. When you're deeper in the pack on a restart, it's less so that kind of drag racing kind of restart. It's only when you're up front that you can really do that. So great from him there, going up against Matt DiBenedetto, who ranked 2nd overall in restart ability this season using some of David Smith's advanced stats there. So a very, very strong showing from him. Martin Truex Jr. is right now. He
really
barely passed him.
I'm shocked by that.
If I pull it up here, I believe it's 69% to 68%. So it's very, very tight there. But yeah, Kurt Busch, excellent there. And with that, locking himself into the round of 8, it locks in basically locks in the best finishing position for that one car since it became the one car when it rebranded from the 41 to the one car. Martin Truex Jr. and Jamie McMurray, their best combined finish was 12th in the standings there, just basically getting into the round of 12 or getting into the chase and basically finishing at the tail end of that. Kurt Busch finishing 13th last year, locks himself in. So at the very least, he's finishing 8th, which is, if you're going through the entire history of that one car and the progression that it's gone back when it was the 42 and everything, that locks in the best finishing position since 1993 when Kyle Petty drove the 42 to a 5th place finish in the championship standing. So bravo to Kurt Busch there. Moving along here, number 2, you mentioned it earlier. How about Chris Buescher picking up back-to-back top 10s? A bit of a resurgence here for that 17 team. Hasn't necessarily been that competitive team that we kind of expected from them this year, getting what we believe to be that driver upgrade, going from Ricky Stenhouse Jr. to Chris Buescher, getting that upgrade in equipment, especially after what we saw from Ryan Newman last year, being able to make the playoffs. Hasn't really gone Roush Fenway Racing's way this season, likely because of the lack of practice time. Chris Buescher is somebody that would have benefited from that big time, given the adjustment going from JTG over to Roush. But as the season's gone along, we've kind of seen that performance kind of uptick, and back-to-back top 10s. It's great to see. Chris Buescher's up to now 8 top 10s on the season, which is double his previous career best in a season of 4. So great to see from Buescher here and get that positive momentum going, hopefully into next season when they can maybe take that step up and maybe get Roush Fenway Racing back in the playoffs. And finally here, come on. He finished 2nd. He's my guy, Matt DiBenedetto. Not only did he finish 2nd again here at Vegas, but the strategy went their way. Got a little bit lucky there with the caution coming out while they were on pit road, but that was a legit top 10 car most of the stage.
Oh, yeah.
You look at him in that first stage, just barely missing out on the stage points, being passed by Clint Boyer in the last couple of laps of that first stage, finishing 8th in the second stage, and looking like he was going to charge his way up that top 10 a little bit in that final stage until the caution came out and he got that track position up front on that front row. Unfortunate not to be able to beat Kurt Busch on that first restart when he was the control car, and just wasn't able to get past him with kind of the cautions falling at some poor times for them. But a great result for him going into a very nerve-wracking week, I'm sure, for him. Of course, Wednesday, I believe it is the Thursday is the September or October 1st. Oh, that's weird to say, but October 1st deadline that we know as the deadline for Wood Brothers and Penske to give him that option that they have built into his contract for 2021. We don't know yet if it's going to be enacted, if Austin Cindric is going to step into the ride for next season, what that means for DiBenedetto's future. We'll find that out most likely this week. He'll find it out for sure this week. I don't know if it'll necessarily be announced. We'll find that out as the week progresses, but that's a way to make a statement here, showing up, being top 10 most of the day and going out and finishing second, nearly getting that win when your contract is on the line. We saw last year him show up big at Bristol when he was announced that he wasn't returning to the 95. A big performance here again with his seemingly job on the line this week and going into that decision. So that rounds out the positive side of Cush's threes. To the negative side, and we begin with Aric Almirola, and he was just quiet all day long. SHR, as we kind of mentioned, was quiet all day long. Kevin Harvick wasn't as dominant as we expected him to be. Clint Bowyer looked pretty solid, given our expectations for him. But Almirola, nothing all day long, and now they're in a pretty big hole going into the rest of these playoffs here. As I pull up the standings here, he's second last in the playoff standings, only to Austin Dillon, and because of his issues, if Dillon had finished the race with the car that was working, Almirola would be the last one on this playoff grid, minus 27. This was kind of the race that maybe you expected given some of the stats, but you would have expected him in his performance this season and kind of outperforming the numbers in his career to this point all season long. Not the performance that they needed, especially going into two wildcard races. Of course, Almirola has been excellent at Talladega, but as we've said plenty of times, you can't rest your laurels on Talladega. So we'll see how the rest of this round goes for Almirola, but definitely not the start to the round that they were looking for, and a disappointing result for them there. Number two for me, Brad Keselowski. We've talked about the numbers a lot on this show, especially in our fantasy segment. Brad Keselowski had an average finishing position inside the top 4 over the last 10 races at Las Vegas. This is the first time, as I mentioned off the top of the show, that he had finished outside the top 10 at Vegas since 2012. And you want to know how long it's been? I'm going to read you out some of the names that finished inside this top 10 in this race. For starters, we've got race winner Tony Stewart, followed by second place Jimmy Johnson, and then Greg Biffle, Ryan Newman, Carl Edwards, Clint Bowyer, Paul Menard, Jamie McMurray, Trevor Bayne, and rounding out the top 10, Dale Earnhardt Jr. Given the fact that, 95% of those names are retired, and you've got a couple of them in the NASCAR Hall of Fame entering it, that's pretty remarkable, and that's quite the stretch there for Brad Keselowski. Whew, and a little bit disappointing, there. Obviously. That's quite the stat there, to say the least. 8 years since his last finish outside the top 10 at this track. And of course, it comes when I need a big result for him in fantasy. So I wouldn't mind one either. But you know what? You're bound to break that streak at some point. But just because of the dominant numbers and him not picking up any stage points and finishing outside the top 10, he has to be on this negative side. And this last one is maybe a bit of a hot take because he did pick up stage points in both stages and he did still finish inside the top 10. But the expectations going into the weekend, we expected Kevin Harvick to be up there challenging for the win, basically being where Denny Hamlin was all race long, and he didn't contend for the stage wins at all, and he wasn't there at the finish regardless as to whether the cautions came out or not. A bit of a disappointing showing for that Ford team. We know that their strength is this 550 horsepower package on these 1.5 mile tracks, and we didn't see that same performance from them that we saw earlier in the season. Now, it's probably just a one-off for them. I'm not reading too much into it, but I'm a little bit disappointed for them only picking up 37 points. We expect Kevin Harvick going into 1.5 miles to pick up at minimum 40 points, challenge for a stage win, finish top 3 in a couple stages, and probably finish top 3 as well. So that rounds out Cush's threes. A bit of a hot take there at the end, putting Kevin Harvick in the negative side of Cush's threes. But at the end of the day, some awesome underdog finishes in this one because of the way that the strategy played out in this one, and some disappointing results as well for some of the big playoff drivers. So this is definitely the kind of the crazy Vegas that we've seen in the last couple of seasons, with it being in the round of 12, and it definitely lived up to the chaos that is the round of 12 going forward into a super speedway, and then the craziest road course that is on the schedule.
Yeah, Harvick's performance really shocked me, like you said. 37 points is below his average on the season by 3 points. He has an average points of like 40 points per race, which is, if you get no stage points, that's a win, basically, which is unbelievable numbers. I mean,
and of course, he's still number 2 in the playoff standings, plus 61 to the cutoff line. We're not expecting anything drastic to happen there. We expect him to walk his way into the playoffs in Talladega, almost certainly. But that being said, a disappointing result on its own in this race.
Yeah. Let's take a look at the playoff bubble here to give everybody a bit of a sense of what's going on here going into Talladega. We've got, I'm going to just say Hamlin and Harvick are moving on, right? Like, I think that's basically in consensus. Yeah. I know I said that about Kurt Busch last week about being eliminated.
Plus 58.
But, right, they're in a very good spot compared to everybody else, which is like 50 points behind them. So, Brad Keselowski kind of starts us off here, and P4 with Kurt Busch jumping up and Harvick and Hamlin in there in second and third. Keselowski's down to fourth.
16.
Only 16 points. Then Martin Truex Jr.
tight.
Plus 15. Joey Logano plus 11. Chase Elliott plus 10. Alex Bowman plus 9, which is the final guy above the cutoff line. And then you start with Kyle Busch minus 9. And then Clint Bowyer minus 20. Big gap there. Then Eric Almirola minus 27, like Kyle said earlier, and then Austin Dillon minus 32. So big gaps after Kyle Busch there. Definitely the first guy there that could point his way in. It's going to take, I'm not going to say 20 points is impossible over the next 2 weeks by far for Clint Bowyer. I think it's a bit unrealistic for Almirola, but I'd say Clint Bowyer has a decent shot here to point his way in if other people have issues, which I imagine they will over the next 2 weeks. But Kyle Busch did everything right this past weekend, really. Got a good finish, got some stage points, and is still 9 points below the cutoff line.
If Kurt Busch doesn't win that race, he's probably looking at like plus 11 to the cutoff line.
Well, you say that, but then I looked at it with what Kurt Busch, if he finishes second kind of thing, it's only like 3 points between him and Kyle there. So it's like only 3 points between Kurt and Kyle for that final spot, but it's still a net gain for Kyle in the end. But Kurt Busch's win here totally screws up the entire playoff grid here for not only the guys that he was below, which was everybody, but mainly the top guys there, because it really compresses everything else with the gaps. So, you know, you look at Logano and Keselowski, meant to have a huge weekend this past weekend, but did not get it, putting themselves in situations where they cannot feel comfortable over the next 2 weeks, especially Joey Logano, someone we both predicted to be out in this round last week. It seems like it's definitely a possibility with Talladega and how much he creates chaos there, and then the Roval.
Any of those guys, fourth or down, there's a legit possibility that they miss out. If you're involved in a wreck early on at Talladega, if you have an issue at the Roval, that's a big swing, even if you just have one of those incidents at one of those races. And that's a huge point swing, and you don't want to have to go into Talladega or the Roval needing a result. And that's the situation that Bowyer, Almirola, Dillon currently find themselves in, but it is very easy to make up any of that ground with a big finish at Talladega if somebody has a big wreck there, which almost certainly will happen, and then the Roval as well, especially if you look at somebody like Clint Bowyer there. But again, just the way that this round of 12 shapes up, it's the craziest round by far just because of the 3 different tracks here. We got a crazy start to things, a surprise winner here. It is more than feasible that we could get a couple more surprise winners here at the end of this round of 12.
I don't know what to predict for this weekend in terms of how they're going to play it as a field.
I have no clue.
Will they be totally cautious, you know, kind of thing where they take it a little easier than what they have in the past with these super speedway races? Or are they going to go balls to the wall from the get-go kind of thing? It's totally up to the drivers on how they want to handle it. It'll be interesting to see how some guys approach it and some guys don't. When you look at some of those names above the cutoff line, they play it very aggressive usually in these super speedway races. They typically do not stay at the back and ride around, and it will be interesting to see what the guys below the cutoff line do if they want to put themselves in a situation where they could wreck early and take themselves even more out of it, or if they go aggressive to try and get points. And in the end, you could just miss out on a couple points by less than a tenth of a second because of how compact the pack is at Talladega. So I don't know what to expect for Talladega. It's going to have my heart racing the entire time.
As per usual. Even more so for you, but
I mean, what are they trying to do to me here? Like I can't. I don't know if I'll survive this round. Obviously it's optimistic thinking that Kyle can come out of this, but I digress. We'll not talk about Kyle Busch for the rest of the show. But what are your kind of early thoughts here, Kyle? We'll talk about it more at length in our fantasy preview later this week. But your early impressions going into Talladega here with some big names that are fairly close to the cutoff line and can't feel too comfortable.
Yeah, it's fascinating here because a big factor here as well is the fact that all of those playoff guys are starting up front as well, just because of the format as well. So it's not like they're jumbled up all throughout the grid. They're all going to be up there in that top 12. Yeah. And that's going to cause some interesting things because you're going to have some guys try and stay up there and get those stage points. You're going to have some guys back off and maybe go to the back. And it's going to be interesting to see who does what. But a couple things that I can feel pretty confident about. Joey Logano is going to be up there contending for those stage wins because he's been aggressive every time that you go to a super speedway looking for those stage wins. We saw at Daytona just recently, he was up there getting both stage wins. I have a feeling he'll be up there probably causing a lot of chaos, but looking for the stage wins there. Hendrick Motorsports is usually up at the front the entire day. I wonder if we'll see something different given the circumstances here, but Alex Bowman, Chase Elliott are probably going to be in the conversation there as well. And then you look at the opposite side of things, you'll probably expect somebody like Martin Truex Jr. to drop back. And then the question is, what is Kyle Busch going to do? Is he going to go for those stage points? Is he going to play it safe? And then the guys that are way out there, and Boyer, Almirola, and Austin Dillon, are they going to try and somehow point their way in, or are they going to go full cards in the be there at the end, go for the win? It's going to be interesting to see how all of that strategy plays out, in addition to all the teammate and everything strategy that goes on there. Super speedway racing is crazy as is, and tossing in this much in terms of playoff implications just makes it that much crazier.
It just takes one bad push and everybody's in it, right? Like it's literally as simple as that. So I am really excited but hesitant at the same time for this next weekend, but we'll talk about that later this week with our kind of preview.
I think you'll enjoy my fantasy going forward, or at least for this Talladega one, because I got something up my sleeve here.
Oh, really? All right.
I think you'll enjoy it quite a bit.
Give me a tease here.
Yes, I am.
All right. Have you already got your fantasy preview for
Not Thursday? A clue, and that's part of why it's up my sleeve.
Okay.
That's basically all you're getting right now. You'll find out the rest on Thursday, but okay, I think you'll enjoy it quite a bit.
He doesn't even know himself what he's going to do.
Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. I just don't know the drivers yet.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Which doesn't make any sense right now, but you'll get it on Thursday.
I'm going to need a little bit of clarifying on Thursday, but see if he takes the approach of getting the finishers actually this weekend. But I digress. I'll move on to a 4-0 to start the playoffs. See if I can go perfect 10 for 10. If I go perfect 10 for 10, I will lose my mind. I
don't know what I'll do. I'll be honest. I'll start picking fantasy winners for like the Xfinity and Truck Series.
Yeah, just for fun, your own made-up thing. We'll move on to the Xfinity Series and Truck Series here now, Kyle. Obviously, both of them to the in the playoffs now this weekend, with the Xfinity Series opening their playoffs and the Truck Series with their middle race of the round of 10. So we'll start off with the trucks on Friday night. Pretty straightforward race, I have to say. Not too much happened. Sheldon Creed sweeps the stages. Looked like he was set for a win. Had definitely one of the fastest trucks, if not the fastest, really, for the majority of the night. The big playoff loser, I'd say, is Ben Rhodes from the night after getting loose underneath Stuart Freeze in there. Hits the inside wall. Todd Gilliland was kind of in the mess of that there, but avoided it. Ben Rhodes, the big loser from that. And Austin Hill, after some great restarts, kind of was slow to start, finishing 13th and I believe 9th in both stages. Got his way up to the front and had some great restarts and held off Sheldon Creed, who was giving it everything he had, got into the wall a little bit late. He tried everything he could, but just could not get past Austin Hill, and recovers from a poor Bristol where he was only plus 2 points, I believe it was, coming into this race. And he punches his ticket to the round of 8 for the Truck Series playoffs. Austin Hill is victorious in Vegas. Great showing for that team to recover after a disappointing Bristol early on. and one of the championship favorites for sure in that number 16 truck for Tori Racing, right? Racing, not Motorsports.
I think it's
Tori
Racing Enterprises or something like that.
Yeah. Nonetheless, Austin Hill is into the round of 8, and we'll take a look at the playoff bubble here, Kyle, because they're going into an elimination race this weekend at Talladega. They're really trying to spice things up here this weekend.
Oh yeah, they are.
The Xfinity Series going to Talladega for the first time in the playoffs for a long time as well. We'll start off with P6 here with Tyler Ankrum plus 15. Plus 15 also for Matt Crafton there in 7th. Just the better finish for Ankrum gives him that mathematical edge there. And Christian Eckes plus 6, the last guy above the playoff cut line, with Ben Rhodes, like I said, the big loser from Vegas, minus 6, and Todd Gilliland minus 19 after 2 disappointing races here to start the playoffs. So, yeah, this is going to be really tough. Everybody above Ankrum, I'd say, is in a fairly decent spot going into a truck series race where it's not the most amount of trucks. Like 32, right? So it's not too many points to lose in terms of the 30 points. I think they're basically safe. But if Ankrum or Crafton have a problem early, it's entirely possible that Gillen and Rhodes can capitalize. So what are your impressions here, Kyle, going into this elimination race for the Truck Series in their first round?
Yeah, just quickly before I get to that, just on the Vegas race for the Truck Series, on the theme of drag racing here, shout out to Tanner Gray, finishing 3rd there. Great result for that team. And also our thoughts are with Natalie Decker, who, of course, pulled out just before the race started there. We still don't know what the health update is there, but thoughts are with her, and hopefully she can be back in the truck sometime soon. But on the playoff standings here, it's very interesting because it is Talladega. That's the cutoff race here. Craziness in that Truck Series. I don't know who came up with that schedule, but thank you, because it's bananas. But yeah, Ben Rhodes is the big loser coming out of Vegas here. He's on the outside looking in, but it's the Truck Series at Talladega, man. Anyone has a shot here. It's the same for every series. You look at Todd Gilliland and his aggressiveness. We've seen it time in, time out. He's going to be in contention. Ben Rhodes is going to be in contention. Everyone is going to be in contention. And really, the only people that can feel safe about it are kind of those guys that are 3+ points to the good. Even your Tyler Ankrams, Matt Craftons that are plus 15. All it takes is one incident finishing in kind of the back end of the grid there, getting 5, 6, 7 points. Of course, Truck Series minimum points finish there is 5 points, so not as big of a drop off there compared to the higher 2 series that go down to 1 point. But who knows, man? It's Talladega. It's going to be crazy. All of these guys are gunning for wins, and the points that go with it that you can carry into the next rounds. But Austin Hill's the only one that can really feel safe because he's the only one that's actually locked in, even though those guys at the top end there, and Creed, Moffitt, Smith, and even Enfinger, they got to feel really good about things. It's going to take a travesty for them to miss out, but it's going to be a good one, as every super speedway is.
Yeah. Might as well do some predictions, I guess.
Yeah, let's do it.
Who's your early predictions here for missing out on the round of 8 here for the Truck Series? We can go back and forth here as we usually do here, but who's your first elimination that you're thinking of? With only 2 eliminations, really, but 2 eliminations. But who's your first one looking at?
My first one, his aggressiveness, I like at super speedways, but it's also a detriment. I don't see him being able to point his way in at minus 19, and I don't see him getting that win. That front row truck has been great this season, has had a lot of speed. It's been great to see Todd Gilliland maybe bounce back a little bit after that disappointing season at KBM. So I think it comes to an end for that team this season. Just don't think that it's really in the cards for them this weekend. But again, who knows, because it is Talladega after all. So Todd Gilliland, I as my first guy on the outside looking in, just because it's so difficult to pick a winner going into a Talladega race. So I just can't put my bets on him going out and getting the win.
Yeah, I agree. There's not much else to that for myself. You basically explained it pretty well there. Gilliland, it's tough for him to, he's still young, still trying to improve. He's had some mistakes on the super speedway tracks in the past and in some different series as well. So I'd bet that Todd Gilliland's probably going to miss out on the next round. Unfortunate for him, for sure. But I think they can definitely take some positive steps in the right direction for next season, for 2021. I'll go next year so that you don't have to go first back to back. I'm going to go with a little bit of a crazy one here. I'm going to say that the defending Truck Series champion is out after Talladega and Matt Crafton.
I like it.
I'm going to go with Ben Rhodes moves on to the round of 8. I think Crafton, he had pretty good luck last season, and I think it runs out in the first round here at Talladega. It's going to take a lot for him to lose out, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, just got a funny feeling again. I don't know what it is, but these funny feelings keep on popping up, and I just like to take a little bit of a risk here. Why not? We're into the playoffs after this, past the first round. So Matt Crafton is the guy I'm looking to be out after the round of 10. So who are you thinking is your second guy?
I like that Crafton pick. I was thinking that way just to be a little bit different, though. I'll say Tyler Ankrum misses out. I think that Christian Eckes goes through, but Tyler Ankrum here, it's just kind of been one of those up and down seasons for Ankrum. Had that win last season that got him into the playoffs. This season hasn't necessarily gone as great under that GMS banner entirely, but it's kind of been up and down, as I mentioned. There's been some races where he's looked really strong, some races when he's been caught up in other people's messes, caused it his own, a lot of different things. I just don't see it this weekend. Although if I had the choice between the two, I might go Crafton, but I'll take Ankrum here, and I'll say that he gets caught up in somebody else's mess.
I think Ben Rhodes moves on this weekend. I'll say that. I
feel pretty safe
someone
about
else
that.
pops out. I think instead of Crafton, I go Eckes, because I don't know if I necessarily like his super speedway experience on going into this weekend. So if I were to say it's between Crafton and Eckes in terms of this weekend, for me, I think Ben Rhodes comes out. But we just could be totally wrong and miss the ball once again, which as per usual with these kind of predictions. But we'll see if the streak continues with that. But we'll move on to the Xfinity Series race here, Kyle, with a dominant performance by Chase Briscoe this past weekend. Definitely set his goal to start the season with 8 wins. That was the target that we heard at the beginning of the year for him to feel like he had a legit chance of getting a Cup Series ride for 2021, and he's accomplished that already. He's got his 8th win of the season at Las Vegas this past weekend, performs the clean sweep, sweeping the stages, and the Vegas race. He won the spring race here as well. So this Vegas turned out to be a really nice track for Stewart-Haas Racing as an organization in the Xfinity Series as well. And Chase Briscoe making a claim that he's ready for the Cup Series next season. They had this little bit of a discussion on the broadcast as well between Letarte and Burton, whether they think that Briscoe should move up or not. And I could totally understand both sides of the story, whether you feel like you'd want to put Briscoe into a car that's not going to be in existence after 1 year and, throw him into the deep end to try and learn something that he may not have to correlate to the next car, or just keep him in the Xfinity Series to try and keep that momentum going. But there's definitely some people that would want that spot if Briscoe does move up, because that Xfinity program that SHR has put together has been masterful after not having one for a long time, and now they've created one that's turned into a powerhouse down there when you look at the likes of Roush that have folded and some other ones that have gone from full-time to part-time sort of thing. So what more can you say about Chase Briscoe, man? This is a great season, and hopefully he gets I'm not going to say hopefully. I hope he gets the ending of the season that he deserves, whether that's a championship or just coming up just shy, because he deserves to be right there in contention for this thing. So what were your impressions after an Xfinity Series race that had some big names that kind of faltered in the likes of Ross Chastain and finishing behind the likes of Brandon Brown, actually? So what were your thoughts of the Xfinity Series race, Kyle?
Yeah, great showing from Chase Briscoe there, hitting that number 8 win that he kind of projected earlier this season that he needed to hit to potentially put himself forward to the Cup Series, which is a number that kind of makes sense given the equipment that he has and the level of competition that it was in the Xfinity Series this year. A bit of a step down after the big 3 advanced after dominating the series the last couple of years. He hits that number and will probably get a couple more as the season goes along here. A disappointing one for Ross Chastain. Looked like they had a really strong car, got into the wall unnecessarily, and it just kind of hampered them the rest of the race. A disappointing result is on the outside looking in here now, and anything can happen at Talladega. We know how good those colleague cars are at the super speedways when they link up, but anything can happen. It's very feasible that they can miss out on stage points if they're in a wreck early on. If something happens up front, you feel good about them being up front, but Are they going to be able to stay up front, get those stage points? Are they going to get shuffled back at some point? Are they going to be in a wreck? So not a great situation for Ross Chastain. It's kind of similar. It may be foreshadowing this weekend. The one car getting the pit strategy to work for them there with the caution coming out as well here. Michael Annett getting a decent finish there in the top 10 after looking like they were 15th place or worse. So he stays in the conversation. He's been a pretty good super speedway racer as well. So who knows, he can blow up the bubble here as well. But the big story for me, how about that race from Ryan Sieg?
Yeah,
that team showed up big time. They were legitimate top 3 speed for most of this race. Had some issues, got shuffled back with the pit road incident, driving through the box, how to back it up.
That was unfortunate.
It was unfortunate there, but still went out and had a very solid finish regardless, getting up inside that top 5, 47 points on the day.
Crazy.
Third most behind Chase Briscoe with a perfect 60 and Noah Gragson with 51 finishing second. That's remarkable stuff from that team. Obviously getting that performance boost here in the playoffs with that RCR Alliance, I believe it is. So great to see from them, and hopefully they can advance here because that would be such a great story. The Xfinity Series is so top heavy with your top teams in Penske, Junior Motorsports, and the Stewart Haas team there, and a couple others as well. But when you see some of those family-owned teams that are kind of in that like 13th and back range, and you get to see one of them kind of develop over these years, get some of those alliances, and have such a great season that they've had in Ryan Sieg, get that performance boost in this playoffs, have such a great start to things, and who knows what can happen from here. I'm rooting for them big time. I hope Chastain can make it through as well, because it would be really disappointing to see such a big talent miss out going forwards just because of the lack of playoff points that he has racked up here. But some interesting storylines to kind of watch here, especially at Talladega, because if any of those kind of guys in that, probably looking at Justin Haley on down, get into some trouble here at Talladega, which almost certainly at least a couple of them will, that blows things up big time. So it's kind of the theme across just because of the super speedway racing and everything that goes along with it. But craziness this weekend, and the constant movement of the playoff bubble will be fascinating to watch, especially here in the Xfinity Series.
Yeah, this is where names are made, as they've kind of made that their slogan for the series. And Ryan Sieg has definitely added his name to the list in terms of people that impress week in and week out with the equipment that they have. So definitely like the front runner of the family run organizations for sure. They've stepped it up over the past.
As well. Not the greatest opening race, but anything can happen at these super speedways as well. And then anything can happen from there else. It's always fun to watch those family-owned teams compete with the bigger name stars of the sport. So that's always fun to watch here, and fully supporting Ryan Sieg and that 39 team here as the playoffs go on.
Yeah, we'll look at the playoff bubble here going into Talladega. We don't have to make any predictions for this one because it's the middle race, but just to give people a bit of a look of what we're looking at here with the bubble. Justin Haley, like you mentioned, plus 14 goes into Talladega. Obviously, colleague has exceptional
to be the favorite.
Speedway luck and speed week in or year in and year out. Ross Chastain also has to feel good about his chances going into this weekend. I'm sure Allmendinger is probably on the entry list as well for this weekend because of with the 16 they always run here. 3, but plus 13 for Brandon Jones in 6th. Ryan Sieg plus 9 just shows you how big of a night he needed to even be plus 9 above the cutoff line. And Harrison Burton, someone that has kind of definitely teetered off as the summer months have gone on. I think JGR as a whole is just not the same this season in the Xfinity Series and even in the Cup Series. I think the field has caught up to them, and I think the talent is just not quite what it used to be there with this team. But it takes time with the development of these guys, obviously, with a fairly young JGR Xfinity stable this season, with Brandon Jones actually being the veteran. Is crazy to say, but Harrison Burton only plus 2 above Ross Chastain, obviously minus 2. Michael Annett minus 10. Could have been a lot worse if you didn't get lucky with that pit strategy. Riley Herbst, someone who has had a very disappointing season in the 18 team for JGR, minus 14. And then Brandon Brown, a great story this season, obviously with his father and cancer and everything going on with them. Thoughts and prayers are with him as he's beat cancer now. So that's a great thing to see for that family, the Brown family. So hopefully Brandon Brown can just, I'm not expecting him to move on by any means, but make it salvageable and make it look respectable. The fact that he's made the top 12 in points this season is a great story in itself. So hopefully Brandon Brown -20 right now can just manage the rest of the round, get maybe a top 10 or 2 there, survive Talladega, maybe put himself in a position for the Roval. But Brandon Brown rounds out the top 12 for the Xfinity Series playoff standing. So -20 there ends it. Any final thoughts here, Kyle, on the NASCAR portion of our show before we get into Formula One after a crazy weekend at Las Vegas?
No, just the craziness that was Vegas. Slowly ramped up as the weekend went along. A fairly normal Truck Series race. It was cool to see Connor Daly and Travis Pastrana as well. They're running pretty solid. Connor Daly finishing in the top 20 there. His car looked like flew up as he went across the finish line. That was pretty funny.
Underglow is back.
Yeah, so that was fun to see. And then in the Xfinity race, normal race, and then some pit strategy there at the end with the caution coming out, and then the craziness that was the end of the Cup Series race, all leading in to what is quintessential NASCAR in super speedway racing. You can't get it anywhere else, and it's awesome to watch. I will confirm that Allmendinger is in the lineup for Colleague Racing this coming weekend, so that's going to be fun to see, of course. And who knows, maybe fingers crossed for a surprise winner, and whether that's somebody that's a non-playoff guy, maybe somebody that's lower in on playoff standings in any of the 3 series. It's always fun to see some of those lower end teams make their way through, and whether that's your Front Row Motorsports or somebody else that's kind of in that same middle tier that has those good finishes. Ray Galding has been the story of the season at the super speedways, getting a couple top 3 finishes there. So always fun to watch those ones, and we'll be getting quite the dose of it this weekend with playoff implications on the line.
Yeah, playoff at its finest. Super speedway racing sets it up as the elimination race for the Truck Series, and then the middle race for both the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series. So we'll talk about that more later in the week. But we'll move on to Formula One, as they were back in action after a week off from Mugello. They were in Russia for the Russian Grand Prix. Obviously, we talked about last week, Lewis Hamilton going into this weekend had the chance to make history, or tie history, I guess, with Michael Schumacher's all-time win of 91. Definitely within reach here, as he set himself up well after qualifying, but calamity of errors over on the race day for Hamilton. Something uncharacteristic, I'd say. Definitely had some more incidents this season, which we'll talk about at the end, but definitely a bit of a surprise there from Hamilton this weekend, who recovered from qualifying, which seemed like it was in jeopardy as well, which we'll talk about here in a sec. But Grosjean, Giovinazzi, Magnussen, Latifi, and Raikkonen, probably your usual suspects there, were out in Q1. Not too much else there. But we move on to Q2, where things got pretty dramatic, as Hamilton's first lap in Q2 was deleted after he exceeded track limits, leaving him with only one opportunity to advance to Q3 with a 1 lap time. And it looked like that was very much in jeopardy, as Sebastian Vettel crashes on his qualifying lap with just over 2 minutes remaining, bringing out the red flag, stopping the session. So drivers returned to the garage stalls, cooled everything down. But Hamilton would have to basically leave the garage stall at the last, very quickly in order to make his lap and get out for the warm-up lap to get to the green lap for his final run. With Mercedes being at the back of the garage as well, it takes just that little bit longer to get to the front of the pit lane, so every second mattered, and he just got there with around 1 second left to cross the line to get in the lap. And it wasn't a spectacular lap by any means, but with the Mercedes the way it is, you can basically run half throttle, and I feel like you'd make it in the top 10. So Hamilton, by the skin of his teeth, makes it to Q3.
So close.
So Leclerc, Kvyat in his home race this past weekend, Lance Stroll, the Canadian, George Russell, and Sebastian Vettel are all knocked out in Q2, setting up for the qualifying shootout where Lewis Hamilton wins pole after barely making it to Q2. Absolutely storms away with the pole position. Looked like he was going to be setting himself up for tying the record this weekend. With another pole position by 0.5 over Max Verstappen, who out-qualified Valtteri Bottas. A very disappointing qualifying for the Finn. Verstappen, obviously Red Bull had never gotten a podium coming into this race at Russia. in the history of its time on the F1 calendar. So a very good run there from Verstappen with his teammate back in 10th in Albon. Very disappointing showing, I'd say, for him this past weekend. Sergio Perez in 4th, Ricciardo 5th, Sainz 6th, Ocon 7th, Norris 8th, and then Gasly's 9th, and then obviously Albon, like I said. So set up for an interesting race on Sunday. It seemed like this was Hamilton's race. Obviously, we talked about last week that with that long run down into turn 1, anything can happen with the slipstream. And what were your impressions, Kyle, after Hamilton? Did you think that we obviously predicted Hamilton was going to maybe get that record-tying win this weekend, but did you think it was basically even more secure after qualifying?
Yeah, it really did feel that way. And whether it was Hamilton having the lap deleted and then barely getting that final lap in, it just kind of felt like things were kind of going towards him getting that, and basically things going his way this weekend. Obviously that changed on race day, but it really did seem like it was trending that direction, that he would match that record this weekend.
Yeah, it definitely did. I was definitely pumped for maybe making a graphic about that. I was thinking, the possibilities are endless, but that would have to wait another couple of weekends here. But we'll get on to why that is the case in just a sec. Bottas gets a great start, though. Gets past Verstappen and was in the slipstream of Hamilton on the start, and was looking like he could go around the outside of him into the first braking zone, but just lost a little bit of traction on the exit. Hamilton gets away. Verstappen misses the first corner entirely and has to go around the kind of access road. I don't know how you really describe that with the bollards there. It was very, very tight compared to last season, and unfortunately for Carlos Sainz, it would just be a bit too narrow for him to kind of squeeze past as he missed the first corner as well and hit the inside wall. Hard impact was there for Carlos Sainz, out once again for the second race running. Unfortunate for the Spaniard. A disappointing weekend for McLaren as a whole. Definitely down in performance this past weekend from what we've seen the entire season up to this point. But Verstappen moved into P3 there, but Carlos Sainz out after that. It was pretty scary. I'm not going to lie. It was a very vicious impact there with the wall, and just how it's set up, it was kind of stupid. I got to be honest. I know they want to make it seem like it's a penalty if you miss the corner, that you got to kind of work your way around those two objects or the foamy things or whatever you want to call them. But it was, I would definitely argue that they don't need to be there for next season. I know it's trying to make sure drivers don't miss the corner by any means, but because it kind of cuts that next part. But I think for driver safety, it was kind of a unfortunate there for Carlos Sainz. And then it didn't get any better on that first lap as Lance Stroll gets hit by Charles Leclerc in the next set of corners, and Lance Stroll will be out of the race after having a terrific start, working his way inside the top 10 after starting in P13 there. But hectic first lap there after the safety brings up the safety car there, Kyle. And before we even get onto Hamilton there, what was your thoughts about the entire opening lap mayhem there?
Yeah, in terms of the bollards and the access road or whatever you want to call it there's the two mindsets. There's the one that is pretty harsh and it was really tight and obviously ruined Carlos Sainz's race. But at the same time, it's also up to the driver to recognize how tight it is and to slow down and not try to basically take it as if it's another corner. Recognize that you missed the corner, so you have to take the penalty there at the time. I get why you're trying to do it at the maximum speed, obviously minimize the penalty, but the opposite end of that is hitting the inside wall and ruining the rest of your race, which is exactly what happened. So there's two mindsets there. I think I lean more towards it's up to the driver to recognize that, but I can understand the other side completely there. But it was really heartbroken there for Lance Stroll because it was such a great start. We know how great of a starter he is, getting up inside that top 10. And I still really don't know exactly what happened there between Stroll and Leclerc and how there wasn't a penalty or anything like that, because it seemed pretty clear cut. But just, I guess, ended up being a racing deal. Unfortunate for Stroll there because Leclerc ended up finishing 6th and Stroll was one of the first on the out. Finishing 20th there. With the DNF. So unfortunate for him. And now that's back-to-back races for Stroll as well. Basically destroying a race car, which is unfortunate for him because both times it wasn't his fault. First time it was a mechanical failure at Mugello, and the second time is because he got hit from behind by Charles Leclerc. So unfortunate for him. But overall, it's been a good season for Racing Point. Of course, Sergio Perez finishing fourth, an excellent result for him at the end of this one. But yeah, after those first couple laps, it was kind of shaping up to be the race that we kind of expected, except for the kind of the chaos off the start. But of course, as we'll get into in a second here, the penalties to Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, something we didn't really know anything about up until they brought it up on the broadcast. On lap 9, Lewis Hamilton was assessed 2 5-second time penalties, obviously adding up to 10 seconds, for illegal practice starts that took place on the outlap from the garage to the grid. Drivers usually do this. It's a typical practice for them to just get the tires feel the clutch and everything with the double clutch system.
Make sure everything's working.
Essentially, right? And unfortunately for Hamilton, he did it in a very poor place, and he didn't realize that he was doing it in a illegal location, but he was, and it cost Lewis Hamilton the race, something that didn't even happen during the race. Obviously, the FIA took time to review the footage, and during the race, Hamilton finds out about a penalty that takes away the opportunity for him to win and tie Michael Schumacher's record. And it will have to wait another couple weekends, like I said. But unfortunately for Hamilton, I think that's just a driver error, I guess. You just got to do it in its normal spot. It is a very unsafe location where he did it at the pit exit, where drivers are usually getting up to speed. I don't know. It just seemed like a very rookie move from Lewis Hamilton there, Kyle.
It's just sloppy. And if you look at kind of some of the things that have happened over the course of this season, yes, Lewis Hamilton has been his dominant self. Yes, he's been the class of the field for 90% of this season. But those mistakes that happen for every single driver, have been pretty glaring ones. And whether you look at the incident at the beginning of the season with Alex Albon, or later on the pit mishap and coming into pit road when it was closed, that was more of a team error than on Lewis himself. And then this one, this past weekend with Lewis, just a couple sloppy mistakes. And yes, they've clearly got the championship in hold. They really don't have to worry about anything like this, but it's just disappointing because it's something that's easily avoidable. And ruined his race, and we heard the complaints, and of course, and you can feel like you completely understand from Hamilton's perspective why he says those things and why he reacts that way. I wouldn't expect any racing driver to react otherwise. But it's pretty point blank. It was an unsafe place to do it. It's very clearly in the rules. He got dinged for it twice because he did it twice. So just unfortunate. Kind of robbed us from what looked like it could have been a decent fight between Hamilton and Bottas, given Bottas and kind of his pace on Sunday looked really solid there up front. But the penalty was just too much to overcome for Hamilton, which would be too much to overcome for everybody, essentially. A great result for Red Bull, though, to finish second. Verstappen with a killer qualifying lap as well to start second on the grid, split the Mercedes as well on race day, just not the order we kind of expected. But I don't expect too many more of these mistakes going forward for Hamilton the rest of the season. There was some kind of speculation as to whether there would be a race ban potentially with the
I wanted to get into that for a second.
We'll get to that in a second, of course, but it looks like that won't be the case. Changed to a fine, but just kind of goes to show what's been is an equally great season for Lewis Hamilton has also had its sloppy moments as well.
Yeah, so just a quick rundown of what this band could potentially look like. He's definitely not out of the woods with it because he has to wait until the Turkish Grand Prix to feel like he's in a safe position, because 12 penalty points equals a race ban. Lewis Hamilton is up to 10. So he is marginally close. If he has another weekend like he just had, he gets a one race ban, which would completely shake up the playoff, or not the playoffs, but the championship standings. But I'll just give you a rundown of what Hamilton has experienced over the past year. Brazil with the collision with Albon, that was 2 penalty points. Austria earlier this season, ignoring yellow flags in Q3. Austria as well this season, a collision with Albon once again. Italy 2020, this past a couple weekends ago, pitting when the pit road is closed. Obviously, that was the big storyline there, along with that insane podium that had Gasly, Sainz, and Stroll. And this past weekend with 1 penalty point each for an illegals practice start with two different incidents there. So 10 penalty points for Hamilton right now. If he gets another 2, he gets a race ban. So he's not out of the woods. If he makes another calamity of errors in the next couple of weekends here at the Nürburgring, or even at what is it called? You know how to say it better than I do, Portuguese.
The upcoming race at Portimao?
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that one. So he has to survive those 2 races before he feeling like he can survive without getting a race ban. Once he gets to the Turkish Grand Prix, it resets. So
that's quite a few races, though, I gotta say.
Yeah, if he has another, can you imagine Hamilton gets a race ban but then still wins the championship? Like, that's just something that
hey, you know what? It would be kind of fun because you'd probably get to see somebody like George Russell maybe step up if something works like that. Maybe, I don't know.
Imagine, yeah.
Something
Let's
like that.
Let's go, come on.
Hey, who knows? Who knows?
To get another couple penalty points.
It would be pretty, although it would be disappointing just to not have Lewis Hamilton in a race. It would be kind of cool to see a one-off where somebody randomly gets chucked into the greatest car on the grid. That would be pretty jokes.
Can you imagine if that guy goes out and wins? Oh, man. Oh, man.
Like Nico potentially gets
imagine
like the
if Nico goes into Hamilton's car.
Could you imagine?
Oh, the speculation is endless. But thanks for putting that in my mind. Now I can't get over that. But, yeah, I mean, there's not much else to really recap with the race itself. Hamilton pits. It serves his 10-second time penalty, puts him 35 seconds behind Bottas. He has to recover. He works his way up to third. The 3 best friends that anyone can have, Russell, Albon, and Norris, battled it out there for a little bit there. And obviously Hamilton never really recovered, got P3, gets a podium for Verstappen second, like Kyle mentioned earlier. And then Bottas wins the Russian Grand Prix once again. Max Verstappen was voted driver of the day, but Valtteri Bottas gets the win. Kind of gets the margin a little bit closer to him and Hamilton with the championship. Definitely has separated himself from Verstappen over the past couple of weekends. The Mercedes is just so reliable, and obviously Max with those 2 straight DNFs has really hurt him there. But if Hamilton does get into some more problems, it's not over yet, but it's definitely his championship to lose.
Oh, certainly.
And we'll see if he can tie the record next time out at the Nürburgring, the German GP. Obviously, I'm hoping that he gets it done there. But, Perez, P4, really great result for him. Really unfortunate for Stroll that he couldn't get up there and see the potential that he would have had with his teammate. Just an unfortunate qualifying really set him back. Ricardo, P5, another top 6 there for the Renault. Really solid as they've taken some tremendous steps forward this season. Leclerc in P6, Ocon 7th. Kvyat gets some points at his home Grand Prix in 8th. Gasly 9th, and Alex Albon, a really disappointing weekend overall for him compared to his teammates' performance. Thought maybe that momentum would carry over from Mugello with that first career podium. It doesn't seem to be the case. So he completes the points-paying positions. Vettel finished outside the points and below 2 customer cars in the Haas and the Alfa Romeo. So unfortunate there for Vettel as he's just looking forward to next season to get into the Aston Martin for next season. So, that's all the kind of the notes I've got from the Russian Grand Prix, Kyle. So any final thoughts here before we wrap up?
Yeah, just finally for me, how about Danny Kvyat going out and getting an 8th place finish in his home Grand Prix? Awesome to see there from him as well. So not the history-setting weekend that we maybe expected it to be. We'll have to wait a couple of weeks when we're back in Germany as well for him to potentially match that record in Lewis Hamilton. So we'll see how that goes going forwards there.
We'll just end the show here with a little bit of news, I guess.
I was going to say, we're keeping up the streak just barely here.
Adam Stern's just squeaking it in here with the news. I'm guessing that's what you're looking at, right?
Yes, I am. And it's a tasty one.
All right. So it seems nothing's obviously confirmed or anything like that, but it looks like Kyle Larson's comeback to the NASCAR Cup Series is becoming more and more imminent as NASCAR is expanding its work with Urban Youth Racing School, and several industry people were in Philly for a visit 2 weeks ago, including Steve Phelps, obviously a huge name in the NASCAR business world with him being the president of NASCAR, and then Kyle Larson and GM/Chevy exec Jim Campbell. So this really sets up for Kyle Larson to be looking back.
Trio?
coming back to NASCAR in possibly a Chevrolet. And what does that mean? Hendrick Motorsports seat is looking very, very likely.
I mean, we kind of talked about it a little bit recently because the rumors have persisted, but the fact that there was a meeting with something that Kyle Larson has worked with kind of behind the scenes these last couple of months since losing his gig with Chip Ganassi Racing and losing his relationship with all of his sponsors in Chevrolet, he's gone to work with plenty of different organizations, but one of them has been the Urban Youth Racing School based out of Philadelphia there. The fact that there was a meeting 2 weeks ago or a visit 2 weeks ago featuring Larson, Steve Phelps, the guy who basically gets to decide whether he gets back in or not. Obviously, there's more people involved, but he's probably the most notable figure there as the president of NASCAR. And the fact that there was a Chevrolet executive there as well. How about that? Like, it did seem kind of far-fetched recently with the rumors that he could go back to Chevrolet with Hendrick Motorsports, but we kind of said at the time, if there was somebody that was going to be able to get him back with Chevrolet, it would be Rick Hendrick. And given here everything that we've seen or haven't seen really from Larson behind the scenes and all the work that he's done without trying to showboat it on social media and basically be like, hey, look at how great a person I am. Look at all the good stuff I'm doing. Ignore that bad thing I did.
He's taken the right approach.
No, He's gone quiet. He's gone off of social media. He's done the things to better himself as a person and go out and help the people that he hurt with the comment he made, and has done it without kind of the fanfare and everything. That kind of shows to me that he's legitimately trying to make change. And it kind of seems here that Steve Phelps and maybe even Chevrolet as well agree. We'll see if maybe this is just kind of a preliminary meeting, if anything comes of this, or maybe it is just NASCAR expanding its work with Urban Youth Racing School, and that's kind of a thing on its own. But that's a pretty big report, because the big domino yet to fall in NASCAR silly season is that 48 car. The rumors recently have been Kyle Larson. And hey, if there's somebody that you want to toss into, if you're talking about pure talent, there's nobody better available than Kyle Larson. And if he's proven that he's a changed person, if he's proven that to NASCAR itself, to Chevrolet, and he can come back into the sport and be a change for positive, and whether that's different sponsorships, partnerships, or just being outspoken on things more and being a face that can kind of push forward change and positivity in the sport rather than the negative black mark that was his comment earlier this season. That's a pretty interesting combination.
Yeah. Leave it to the last minute here with the breaking news.
Hey, you know what? We're keeping up the streak. I
like it. They know that we are just about to wind down, so it was perfect timing.
Literally, as we're about to wrap up, he tosses that one out. So that's pretty fun. And I'm certain that we'll have more to talk about that later in the week as maybe some more rumors come out after that report.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more and more likely that Larson's back next season in the Cup Series. Where that ends up being, who knows? But Hendrick Motorsports is seemingly like the top destination for Kyle Larson's services in 2021.
Who would have thought?
We'll talk. We talked about this. Well, we didn't really talk about this, but for so many years when Larson was actually in the Cup Series, it seemed like he's got to get that little step up in equipment, right? If he gets that step up in equipment, I don't think anybody would have predicted this is how it would have gone down, obviously.
No kidding.
If Larson seemingly ends his way up to Hendrick Motorsports, they're getting one heck of a driver over there and one heck of a guy to replace Jimmy Johnson. It would be interesting to see how they work with the numbers situation over there. But this is a great story if Kyle Larson is able to come back and is a changed person and has evolved with taking the steps necessary to better himself. So I think that'll do it for today, Kyle. I don't want to keep it on too long. What a great episode with some upsets this past weekend with the NASCAR Cup Series and Kurt Busch.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't be happier with him. I'll have a graphic out there sometime this week about Kurt Busch, doing some fun little things with Vegas and everything with the luck that paid into that.
Nice.
So we'll get that done with school and stuff. That's got to come first, but we'll get that graphic done sometime this week to put it up there on the Green Flag. So make sure to go follow us on Instagram at the Green Flag. Got some exciting content there. We'll have the fantasy post recap that Kyle puts out there every week. Later on this week, we'll have that up there on the page, and I'm sure that there'll be some clips of us looking stupid about Kurt Busch with our predictions. So we're not always right, but we're right some of the time. But this past weekend, we got it a little bit wrong. But that's what makes motorsports so fun to watch. Makes me fall in love with the sport even more after a weekend like this. So with that, I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman. Signing off for now. We will talk to you later this week with our Talladega fantasy preview, and I'm sure with much.
You're gonna want to tune into that one.
So we'll see if Kyle's ballsy strategy or off-the-wall strategy here pays off. So stay tuned for that. But we'll talk to you later this week. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll talk to you again later.